Together with the vaccines, these are reasons for hope. But let's put progress and the hope into perspective. Thanks to these efforts made more recently, during the second lockdown, the Toronto 7 average of new COVID cases has gone from 1,023 at its peak to 592 as of January the 28th. This is significant movement in the right direction. But let's remember, as recently as August of 2020, just a few months ago, that very same 7-day moving average was 15 in the city of Toronto. So we have come quite some distance in these past few weeks, but we simply have to stay the course to see this thing through. All of this will, I hope, remind people of following basic public health advice. Please stay home as much as possible. Please wear a mask. Please keep your distance from others. Please get tested if you have any symptoms, and please do not go to work sick. And please avoid gathering with people outside of your household. I did have a moment to comment this morning when I was watching television and saw the headlights coming down the Don Valley Parkway from the north into the city. And it did strike me to wonder, did all those people really have to come to work today? There are people who have to.
Who says they're going to
work? There are many
work?
other people who are supposed to have been asked by their employers not to come to work, and I hope people will remind themselves of that. And please stay home if you possibly can. And employers, please remind your employees they can and should stay home if they possibly can. I would like to ask Dr. Davila to provide her report for us today.
Thank you, Mayor Tory, and good afternoon. Today I'm reporting 961 cases of COVID-19. 397 people are in hospital and 105 are in the ICU. I regret to tell you that 18 people have died.
What, today?
The case counts today are higher as a consequence of adjustments due to the transition to the provincial information system for case and contact management, which we announced last week. The change will bring Toronto Public Health into the same data reporting system as all other public health units. That work began over the weekend and is advancing steadily. All our other activity is proceeding as usual. As I indicated last week, the full suite of data we typically provide will be reduced this week. Toronto Public Health will continue to provide the new cases over the previous day, as well as total cumulative cases, new hospitalizations since the previous day, ICU admissions, intubations, deaths since the previous day, and cumulative deaths. The data migration from one system to another is complete. We are now in the phase of quality controls, which may require adjustments to figures as that work is finalized.
And you're not complete yet.
Also, today we have just issued a media release with regard to an outbreak in Toronto seeming to involve the B117 variant. The outbreak occurred at Belmont Meats, a meat production facility here in Toronto. Currently, there are 78 confirmed COVID-19 cases linked to this outbreak. Of these confirmed cases, 2 have screened positive for the B117 variant and will undergo further testing to confirm these are variants of concern and the type. Toronto Public Health has communicated to advise cases and contacts that the variant has been identified in this outbreak.
You can do contact tracing. Oh, you do this, but not
COVID-19
do variant
variants
tracing.
have been with us throughout the pandemic. This is not to minimize the concerns about the 3 variants that have been talked about so much recently. What is believed about the known
It
variants
piggybacks
now
on humans.
is
It
that they are
piggybacks
more
on people. No,
transmissible.
it only exists thanks
They may be able to make some people
to
sicker.
organisms with living cells.
They may be able to reinfect people who've had COVID-19 and recovered. And finally, that the vaccines developed seem
Regular
able to
COVID can
produce
do
an
that
immune
too.
response despite the variants, although sometimes at lower levels. We should make decisions for ourselves on this basis for our own self-protection.
You emphasize the
While
wrong parts
variants
of your
in
sentences.
viruses do emerge regularly, with respect to COVID-19, modeling and declining case rates in other parts of the world suggest strategies that create distance and limit interaction are still successful, even where the
Doesn't it
variants
sound like white people
are
just
present.
learning how to sell drugs in the corner?
Certainly the trend in cases in
Limiting
Toronto says the measures we're taking
Interactions.
are working.
You see the same crackhead selling to the same crackhead every day, all day for
And the measures we
years.
take as
You
individuals.
see that crackhead coughing and spitting, and the crack dealer don't get sick. What's going on here?
We are able to access demonstrates this. The figures we have for mid-January indicate 81% of device time at home. That's almost as high as last spring. That time at home, time apart.
We're from 87 to 82. There's a huge thing. You go from 82 to 81.
Indicators we're seeing.
There's a bigger thing. I don't understand what you're trying to tell us.
It is good news, but the work is far from done. And as we see today, the stakes are high. We need to keep at it.
I fucking hate your delivery.
We wind up back where we started. The Center for Disease Modeling at York University shows that if transmission of COVID-19 increased by 20%, we would expect 3 times more cumulative deaths by May compared to the number if transmission stayed at the levels
B117 is 70% more transmission.
If transmission were to continue to decrease even more, we could expect to cut the total number of deaths almost in half. This underscores the importance of distance in every respect. To mutate, viruses have to replicate. To replicate,
they exist after
viruses need human cells.
No,
so
they don't.
Our job is not to give it to them. More than ever,
you're not the kids under 5 don't have to be tested to get on a plane to come here.
Much as you can.
What about animals? You're not testing animals.
It's important we continue to see the recent decreases in case counts.
You haven't found an animal yet this virus can't infect, except maybe fish.
Not one to be taken for granted.
And since the virus don't breathe oxygen,
one of the most important things we know
oxygen could
is
be its
how
worst enemy.
variants occur and what we can do to limit the impact. Whatever you can do, however you can do it.
This virus needs human cells.
Distance.
We've been at this a year and a half. How the fuck did you think that makes sense to say?
From space between you and others to wearing a mask as much as possible. I'll now hand it over to Chief Pegg to deliver his remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Davila, and good afternoon. Before I provide my formal update this afternoon, I'd like to extend our sincere condolences to the family, friends, and all those impacted by the
no mention of Black history, Black
four Toronto residents on Friday morning.
Anti-Black racism.
This is an unspeakable tragedy that impacts each of us deeply.
Shut up.
I'm very thankful that the injuries our firefighters sustained while working to rescue occupants and fight the fire were not life-threatening, and that we expect each to make a full recovery. Our thoughts are with the family, the community, as the investigation into the origin, cause, and circumstance continues.
So why is it still legal to build houses out of wood?
Continue to work diligently to enforce the regulations relating to COVID-19. The city has taken formal enforcement action 2,110 times to date.
Yes, but you tell us every time that you issue 10 warnings for every fucking
with
fine.
The Reopening Ontario Act. As a result, 3 charges were laid and 10 notices were issued.
Hey, buddy, are you beginning to think you should have had some input on the official Ontario municipal plan or whatever they call it?
Officers also proactively inspected 138 bars and restaurants, with 1 charge being laid, resulting in a 99% compliance rate.
Bullshit.
I want to thank the vast majority of residents and businesses who continue to help
It's
stop
lower
the
than
spread of
retired
COVID-19 in our
people,
city
1 out of
by
138.
complying with the public health restrictions and regulations. Over the course of the weekend, 47 charges were laid as a result of the investigation of complaints relating to large gatherings on private property and in private residences. This weekend, Toronto Police also responded to protests and rallies and issued a total of 2 criminal code charges as a result. I'd like to extend my thanks to each of our enforcement officers who do their best.
All
to
you're
meet
telling
the
us that they
challenges
did the job, but
associated
we
with
know they didn't.
COVID-19 regulations
Hey,
each day.
how come your firefighters don't like coming in
I'd
this
like to bring
building?
an important safety concern to your attention this
Why
afternoon.
is it you won't enforce the fire
Outdoor
code
skating is a
here?
favorite Toronto pastime.
You got
But
fucking white
skating on
boy
natural
doctors
and
telling me
man-made
my
bodies of
address
water,
is
such
the
as ponds
reason
and stormwater ponds is very dangerous.
I got bit by a
It is
dog.
therefore prohibited in Toronto, with
Imagine
the
that.
exception of on Grenadier Pond.
Shut up.
Grenadier Pond is the only natural pond in Toronto where the City of Toronto tests the ice thickness. A flag at Grenadier Pond indicates when the pond is not safe for skating. When that is the case, a red flag is posted, alerting potential users to the dangers of thin ice. When the ice on Grenadier Pond may be used at your own risk, a yellow flag is posted. Currently, Grenadier Pond is unsafe for skating.
Tell them why
and
it's
the
called Grenadier
corresponding red
Pond, bro.
flag is
Tell them
posted.
why it's called Grenadier
Other
Pond.
natural and man-made bodies of water are not safe for skating, hockey, sledding, or any form of recreational activity
Nope.
because the ice that forms on these bodies of water is unpredictable, unstable, and often dangerous. As temperatures
Unsafe. You
fluctuate,
said unsafe.
pond water and ice levels also fluctuate and may become unstable. Salt runoff can also make the ice dangerous. Recently, 2 people have fallen through the ice at Grenadier Pond
Did they
when
die?
it was deemed and posted as unsafe. Fortunately, our first responders were able to successfully rescue and assist both back to shore, where they were treated by paramedics.
For what?
This is a successful outcome to an immediately life-threatening
Get in the truck. The
situation.
heater's on.
We are also hearing reports of warning and danger signs on ponds being removed,
I was
which
thinking
is
that.
extremely dangerous for any unsuspecting skaters. The city has more than 50 artificial ice rinks across the city where people can get out
You
and
just
skate
said there's
safely.
only one where they
As
tested.
someone who has been personally involved
You just said
in
there's only
numerous
one
ice
pond,
and
Grenadier
water
Pond, where
rescues
they
over the
tested.
years, I implore
Post the
you to
flag
stay
and all
off unverified natural ice and stick to the safety of our network of artificial ice rinks. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Before we go to questions, just a reminder to reporters on the line
It's like
to
the opposite of
please
the
unmute yourself.
can-do
before you
reactor
ask your
compared to
question,
the
and we'll go
GE
first to
reactors.
Brian Passafield from the Toronto
GE
Sun.
reactors
Brian,
are
go
designed
ahead,
to fall out of a submarine.
And good afternoon, everybody. First question
Can
is
do
for Dr.
reactors or
DeVille.
not.
In your opinion, what needs to happen in terms of numbers or trends for you to be comfortable with allowing Toronto schools to resume in-class learning?
Well, you know, Brian, there was a recent letter put out by the Council of Medical Officers of Health around the importance of school from the health perspective for children. And certainly,
Yeah, it provides a
while there
place
is
for you to
concern
do your
around
public
making sure
messages
that
and
they
all that
are
shit.
as safe as
That's all it does.
possible environments from a COVID-19 perspective, both for the students and for the staff.
It makes
we
it easier
recognize
to
that
track
there
all the
is a
incidents of
significant
sexual
level
assault
of
on children.
in-person
If you keep
learning
all the children
plays
in one place
in the
with the
overall
child
health of children.
molesters, that would make it a lot easier, you know,
There
on
has been
paper.
a real strong call on the part of the Council of Medical Officers of Health to really, as much as possible, aim for school reopening while at the same time creating as safe an environment as possible. And we know that one of the most important parts in terms of creating safe school environments from a COVID-19 perspective is actually reducing community spread. So to the extent that we are able to drop community spread of COVID-19
Because
to the
you're gonna
greatest
care
extent
how you
possible,
got it
we
if you
know
get
that
sick.
enhances the ability for schools to run as safely as possible. That's what it
Enhance
comes
the
down to. Hence,
ability
it continues
of
to be
schools to
very
run as safely as
important
possible.
that we
Hey,
maintain the
remember
self-protection
before,
measures,
2 years ago,
that we've
the
all
big
become so
stories where
familiar
kids
with,
getting
because
stabbed and shot at school?
Distance is the fundamental fundamental protection. It's the
That
most
all 4
important
teachers
protection
unions
we
went
have,
on strike,
against
not at the same
COVID-19
time, one after the other.
vaccine
All the
supply,
kids got passed
becomes
that year.
more and
That
more
was
available.
2 years ago.
Follow-up question, Brian? Have to unmute yourself there, Brian. Nope.
I heard you, buddy. Where are you?
Okay, if you do, send us a private message and we can come back to you later. We'll go next. Oh, you're off mute. Okay, Brian, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry, the stupid WebEx kicked me out, but it seems to have probably back off that check the YouTube for your response. Thank you so much for that, Dr. DeVille. My second question is also for you.
You do these on YouTube?
I saw some troubling numbers
Really?
in terms of overdose calls and deaths in the city.
Oh, that explains why I
Do
can't
you
find
fear
it.
that this is the
I'm on
start
this
of
side of
another
it.
sad chapter in these lockdowns and the ongoing pandemic? And what needs to be done to ensure more people don't die needlessly of overdoses in the city?
So it is a terrible story to have had to put out there. That on Friday there were, a record number of calls for suspected opioid overdose, and we know that over the course of the pandemic, this has been a situation that unfortunately has gotten worse. And we know that there are many impacts that we need to think about on the longer term, as we ultimately emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. Mental health challenges are certainly one of them, and substance use challenges represent another key element and a key problem that needs to be addressed on a go-forward basis. I think fundamentally when we look at what
you are the most useless person in the world when it comes to
communicating,
well
articulated in the Toronto Overdose Action
Like a
Plan.
truck?
A plan that has been endorsed by the Board of Health and really does draw on the science around what it takes to actually really
I just want to know for sure they don't ask one question about Black History Month.
Issues. So it does look at prevention. It looks at harm reduction. It looks at treatment, right? And it looks at policy. And fundamentally, I think as a society, what we need to do is consider this the health problem that it is, rather than looking at it solely from a justice or a law enforcement perspective.
Nobody's saying about justice or law enforcement, you retard.
It's certainly supported by
You just combine those two things like they're one thing.
And it is something that we have been working on for the many years now at Toronto Public Health. We will continue to do that important work over the course of the pandemic, and I expect it will be something that will be on our work plan as we emerge out of the pandemic, and beyond.
From the pandemic.
Right. I would just like to comment on that issue as follows. Dr. DeVille just said this was a health problem, and I know she meant it.
They've all got their opinions. All of society, I'm trying to reach you because I'm Jesus and I will save you.
We have literally lost
doing the sign of the cross on your face there.
And the last couple of months are startling, they're disturbing, they're unacceptable, but they're following along on a pattern that has existed for some time now, where we've literally lost on an annual basis hundreds of Torontonians, just in Toronto alone, hundreds of people who've died from drug overdoses. And if you said to yourself, well, has the response provincially, especially from the provincial healthcare system, matched the scale of the tragedy? The answer is no. I mean, if we had this going on in any other area of health, or for that matter, in any other area at all, we would be.
Your genius idea was to come up with Oxy Neo and then to cut off everybody that had legitimate prescriptions. That makes sense.
The overdose action plan that's been referred to, and
remember, everything's always up to a doctor, right?
I just think this is something.
Nowhere does it say the doctor has to do something right or wrong.
And the health system, which is principally where this rests. This is not a question of morals. This is not a question of compliance.
When you have a family doctor, that's like saying, aren't you part of a church?
Mental health and other kinds of health that have to do with substance use. And so I'm going to be talking on an increasing basis about this. I have been over the last number of months, but I think
no, you haven't, you lying fucking cocksucker. You haven't mentioned it since you've been mayor.
And you've been
He's
listening
never
to
mentioned it.
Toronto's COVID briefing here
He's
on
never
680
mentioned
News.
the
We'll have more
opioid
on the mayor to say
crisis,
coming up
ever.
in just moments. For Sarah Paradigm, Steve Roberts, 680 News Time.
You dirty junkies are bothering my neighbors. I don't appreciate that. Yeah, because you could get evicted for it. Otherwise, you don't give a fuck.
Is 680 News.
afternoon. This is Monday, the 1st of February. Slow down on some minutes.
Drugs out the fire,
breaking news right now. A Toronto meat production facility is dealing with a COVID-19 outbreak that public health believes is connected to the variant of the virus first detected in the UK.
New mandatory COVID testing for incoming international travelers. Pearson passengers approved.
I would take the free test any day of the week.
The Ontario program is now in effect.
A travel prevention loophole. Even though Canadian Airlines have agreed to suspend services to the Caribbean and Mexico, it's still quite easy to book a flight to these sunny destinations.
As local COVID-19 hotspots see cases drop, a decision on allowing GTHA students back to in-class learning could come this week.
Maple Leafs off until Thursday when they kick off a 3-game series with the Vancouver Canucks. Raptors and Magic have another game Tuesday. Sports at 45. Another go green move, this time from a Canadian grocer, and on a winning day so far.
Grocer.
Some big tech stocks related.
Not a grocer, a grocer. There we go.
Coming up the wood, I'm a tough motherfucker. Slumming with the sword, I'm a rough motherfucker. They don't wanna catch me, I'm my best, but I'm my worst. And that's exactly why I gotta put them in the dirt. You should see us go to work. Watch me hit them where it hurts. Watch me fucking hit them first. Watch me put them in a hearse. Drinking blood to quench my thirst. Catch a charge with every verse. This who cheated kinda cursed. FTP across my shirt. Yeah, fuck the population. Fuck your life and occupation. I'ma watch you run away. It look like immigration.
Same grubby sweater since high school. Drugs out the vial, on fire, one more screens and vials. Survival of the fittest, I'm a walking pandemic. Try to take on me and do the jogging man with it. What's a champion scene without some sadness up in it? I know the world is ours, I'm just having a minute. Another dead man walking with a cat.
Keep it up. Keep it up, pedophile. Keep it up. Yeah, so the alternative title for this one. I won't make the titles of the video about these idiots, but about half the videos that end lately is these idiots. Dropping more O's and Sierra in a green Sierra. Tinted windows, thinking of the error. It's our era. I'm an air sign, but they call me the water bearer. Bearing arms, with my arms always covered. Blasting at the back the head of an undercover. She's tight under the covers of darkness. The sharkiest motherfuckers up to get done by guppies. Running around with guppies. Dumping out the trash.
How we share flaws, give the empathy in my epitaph. Epithet, you're my nemesis. Yeah, I said that with emphasis. Ain't no common ground or no common sense. Fuck your comments, that's the consequence when you on the fence. Killing will, all my head is fair. I can't call.
I'm gonna just start robbing trains. I'm gonna start robbing trains.
Stay lifted and
I'll get like pocket watches and rope pins
if you
and
feel
shit.
it froggy, get knocked back to a polywall.
Sure, you'll see the black dove, so don't push no more. When it comes to push and shove, I'll put you through the floor. Someone come and catch some smoke. I swear you'll be the one that choke. When I'm fucking an angry bitch, I'ma wipe out all your hope. I'ma smoke your fucking dope.
So the last grape that sprouted, I think the timing of the length of the days was wrong. And when I brought it over here, all the fruit flies landed on it, and I think that's what killed it.
You can't comprehend against me, you cannot defend. Pain and fear you can't prevent. I'll make sure you feel suspense. Put you under the cement. Put you in the ground. We're talking down to a nihilist. Taking all these chemicals, I feel like I'm a scientist. Breaking my appliances. Anger with the sciences. That is what my style is, and evil is my stylist.
How you smoking Percy's and flipjacks on the lighter thief? If you let the green shit go full circle like a reef, ain't it scary? Mixing Katy Perry's and Jerry Aviary.
First black cab driver in 1954 in Toronto.
The pen should make the paper move. Both are stationary. Can't sleep in my bed since you was up.
Oh yeah, all your racist jokes and things aside, cabbies used to be all white. Basketball used to be all white. Yep. No mention of any of these things. The mentality is somebody who will sit and watch somebody on a live stream until they go to bed and then start dumping you. Waste, man.
I've been tracking all day, trying to find a way to get about it. I know that shit don't last long, either I be dead and gone or them cups are on my wrist. And I'm just here trying to get up off the streets, and they took my boy from me. I'm out here lonely on the block, cause my homies on lock. This ain't how it's supposed to be.
Niggas know it's average. We pushed on the strap, we gotta have it. And don't say a word about that thing that spits rapping. Niggas won't hesitate to put a space on the backflip. Your hustle's backed up. My hustle been doing backflips. SKs that fold out. Hollows been causing showouts. Rolling with Michelle. Been trapped.
Yeah, it's the fatal, baby. I'm back with this motherfucking track, y'all.
Money is gas, making it dash. Feel like a blast with that on my cash. Taking it slow, I'm taking it fast. Face on the dash, whipping that ass. Fuck with the cats, I don't fuck with them rats. Throwing it bad while she busting it back. Talking that shit, better watch how you act. Doing the game and the place in the set. I know I'm real bit like the missing link. All my bitches small with a lot of ink. All I really know is I want more bling. Money calling me, I keep on chasing. You see me on stage and I'm glowing. You not believe where I'm going. I'm fucking with this beat, I'm stroking. Son and rappers coaching. Don't fuck with my vibe when I'm smoking. Judging all these rappers by the clothing. Need a role model and a Trojan. Provoking while I'm promoting emotion. Demons in my head, keep erasing them. Smoke the pain away, I can't erase it. Damn, if you roll it up, you better lace it. Yeah, oh yeah, uppers and them downers, and I chase it down. Pussy chasing me, I do not chase it down. Catch me online, got the playlist, wanna ride. I got the spacious, I stay lit, fuck the police and the racists. Ride for my homies and I'll never turn, baby. Cremated when I die in a diamond urn, baby. I love some thick thighs, yeah, I never learned, baby. Devil in disguise, but my friends call me Hades. Living up like I'm lucid, in the woods with these truists. Chilling with the humans, getting stupid off these fluids. Rooted in the music, the money is elusive. You say you taking shots, my homies really shooting. Rather different. Yeah, I hope you hear the difference. This is not a coincidence, legitimate and present, man. Your lyrics sounding belligerent, I'm feeling that deliverance. I'm tired of being considerate. Your music is sounding like some gibberish. Everyone's hearing me killing this. I'm the rapper and the instrument. I don't know what you talk about. All my homies is innocent. The leader of the syndicate. This music is my stimulant. All my rhymes are written intricate.
Yeah, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up, keep it
Listen
up.
closely when I'm spitting this.
What does that eyes closed thing mean to you anyway?
You can't keep me cooped up in here, okay? I am a peacock. You gotta let me fly. My crimes are heinous.
Saying I don't need payment. I'm feeling like the greatest. It's time to show my faces. Fear and loath in Las Vegas. Never will they tame us. They hating on this rapper, but they will not claim us.
Don't hit that fucking tap on that screen, bro. Whatever
Yo,
you're doing.
and all these young kids celebrating, making them contagious. I hit you with the latest. I'm dropping all this hot shit like the runs have a anus. Calling all creators, surrounded by the
buddy,
pages.
come on, come on.
One day, oh God. 666 up on the dash and I say.
Oh, fuck, he's about to hang up. No, don't let him leave, don't let him leave.
Bad pride, big dreams, I'ma make it on God. 666 on the dash and I slay. Get the cash, all she had to say.
You fucking done, stupid? Holy fuck, you're dumb. You spend this much time watching me, and you're gonna time everything. I'll be the smart one. I'll time it. He'll never know it's a person going in.
Money is gas, making it dash. Feel like a blast with that on my cash. Taking it slow, I'm taking it fast. Face on the dash, whipping that ass. Fuck with the cats, I don't fuck with the rat. Throwing it back like she busting it back. Talking that shit, better watch how you act. Doing the game and I'm chasing the set. I know I'm real bit like a missing link. All my bitches small with a lot of ink. All I really know is I want more bling. Money calling me, I keep on chasing. You see me on stage and I'm glowing. You not believe where I'm going. I'm fucking with the speed I'm stroking. Sunning rappers coaching. Don't fuck with my vibe when I'm smoking. Judging all these rappers by the clothing. Need a role model and a Trojan. Provoking while I'm promoting emotion. Demons in my head, keep on facing them. Smoke the pain away.
Come on, dipshit.
If you roll it up, you better lace it down. Oh yeah, uppers and them downers and I chase it down. Pussy chasing me, I do not chase it down. Catch me online, got the playlist on the ride. I got the spaceship, I stay lift up the police and the races. Ride for my homies and I'll never turn, baby. Cremated when I die in the diamond urn, baby. I love some thick thighs, yeah, I never learned, baby. Devil in the skies, but my friends call me Hades. Living up like I'm lucid in the woods with these truists, chilling with the humans, getting stupid off these fluids. Rooted in the
That's it. Keep trying to show me my eyes closed, but they're open. Oh, fuck, Jesus Christ, buddy, fuck off.
Sounding like some gibberish. Everyone's hearing me killing this. I'm the rapper in the instrument. I don't know what you talk about. All my
so now the browser disappeared and come back about 4 times. You need to fuck off, bro. You are a fucking waste of oxygen. Complete fucking waste, bro. Complete waste. And then you hit the report button to YouTube when you're done. You're real creative.
I'm back with this motherfucking track, y'all.
No, I'm not supposed to be able to tell they did that. Come on, it's been 4.5 minutes. It's been 2 fucking rap songs. Holy shit. Wow, you're so good. You completely foiled my plans of turning on the radio. It's broken. Magically.
All my bitches small with a lot of ink. All I really know is I want more bling. Money calling me, I keep on chasing. You see me on stage and I'm glowing. You not believe where I'm going. I'm fucking with this beat I'm stroking. Sunning rappers coaching. Don't fuck with my vibe when I'm smoking. Judging all these rappers by the clothing. Need a role model
0 degrees Celsius. Dew point 29.
Clear that is.
Humidity was
like
88%.
Running in the background.
Winds were north of 15 miles an hour, producing a wind chill of 22 in the barometer.
Your blender's not running.
Transmitted from an antenna located on the UNC.
You got that cold blowing snow wind.
The station serves the northeast.
So
here is a special message from the National
Every time I
Weather
turn it
Service.
off, you turn it back on. Keep it up. Keep it up. It's just one exploit to another. So you can figure out some of these people are only finding one piece of code, and some of them are finding about a dozen. And they just throw everything they have, like impulsively, just like the pathology of a sex offender. Oh, he's talking. Do it now. I don't give a fuck what their motivation is. The world's full of these idiots. I keep saying I'm a minority. They want to argue with me. Okay, there's 500 of me and 40 million of you. Okay. I grew up on Queen Street. I'm used to there being 10,000 fucking crackheads and crazy people around for every 1 or 2 not fucked up people. So nothing you do surprises me. Nothing. You're not outthinking me or doing it. You're not ruining my day. You're not stopping me. Like, what's the big plan here? The description of the channel is all there is to it. I have this, this, and this. I thought it was documenting me dying, but that didn't happen. I would be out doing all sorts of shit, except everybody's at home. There's no way to make money. So, whose time you wasting but yours? You sit and watch this shit. I've watched you for 45 minutes, and the second you can see me on the screen, you flip the fuck out with your, I want to use the word attacks, but then every doctor, oh, he thinks it's a psychic thing. No, it's on the internet, it's called an attack. Pathetic. Oh, and those red, so, see the red shit not flashing? See, it's not flashing now? Yeah, that's the system attempting to redraw the screen over and over and over and over because they keep interrupting the process somehow, but they can't stop it, apparently, which is what blows my mind. If you see you're not getting anywhere with what you're trying to do for over a year now, what is the point?
The Trojan provoking while I'm.
I mean, like, every time you do that, you're just putting yourself on a watch list of People who ally themselves with child pornographers. That's all you're doing. You're literally just at the only place you're going to find these pieces of cut and paste code, I guarantee, is on some sort of dark web message board about, yeah.
Promotion, emotion, demons in my head, keep on facing them, smoke the pain away.
And so you can tell if they're using a cell phone to do it, or a wired internet connection. Then these idiots have messages on the fucking videos.
Bundled tight.
Smart. Smart.
And in plain
oh, well,
sight.
I'll retract the message, and then YouTube
I tell
won't know.
you about the night when.
Which brings us to, how are they getting the IP address of the YouTube? That's. And then, of course, if it's actual government entities, that's a different story. We get those from 95, don't we?
The heart is so.
That's right, Mr. Government Man, Mr. G-Man. Everything you're doing to this internet connection makes you look on paper just like the child pornographers. So why are you doing it? What stealth mission is that? The only part you're getting wrong with that is who you're attacking. You look fucking stupid. Everything gets logged. Everything. It's the rotor I'm tapping on. So in my world, if something doesn't work, like default work, like fail-safe working, or whatever, it doesn't last long. So by default, everything I have just keeps running and running and running. Worst case scenario, I turn the power off and turn it back on and we start over. Remember, I was trying to roll a joint like an hour and a half ago. Still got half the joint. All these idiots do is make my weed last longer. I'm supposed to get all fucked up. Why are you bothering me? No, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck because I know what your pathology is. You do this same thing. You do these same attacks to little kids' TV sets and the Wi-Fi cameras at daycares or whatever the fuck you got going on. Nanny cams, that's what they're called. And somehow you think doing it to us is a good idea. Attracting more attention is a good idea. Keep it up. Keep it up.
It came out of nowhere. I couldn't get held away.
Did you get the license number?
No, it happened so fast.
Ideally, the person being harassed shouldn't even realize it's a human behind it.
It came out of nowhere. I couldn't get held away.
All these graphical interfaces are built on the studies they did with us in the 80s. I've told this story. I've told it multiple times. I don't know how you think you're going to confuse me as to what the computer is and isn't capable of doing. It was my generation that explained it. Everybody older than me learned it from us, not the other way around. 1999, you had a cell phone with internet access? Because I did.
Infatuation, verbalization, spit at you. Duck the oral boomerangs back to smack you.
Well, I paid $200. Not even. They're about like 189 or something.
Bionic Oldsmobile, the sonic wheels like Panasonic. We play this on Alpine units and bombs.
You want to press me with $1,200 cell phone.
Plutonium liquid, see how it floating out the tap like water. Mega verbal slaughter, still simp, cheap, sick and sharp in the sea. You touch me, you catch a charge from the energy. I'm blessed with tremendously hot spit. Straight out the cockpit, distracted, clock tick.
After the first two, I realized that the $20, $10 to get a case was worth the money. You put up folks to work.
Futuristic gamma gangster lean attack analog and galactic sonic wheels, bionic Oldsmobiles. Futuristic gamma gangster lean attack analog and galactic sonic wheels, bionic Oldsmobiles.
a hacker would go in and delete all my videos, or, you know, just a few of them here and there, or shut down my email account, or something like that, right? You know what you do? You fuck up my cell phone, and then you try logging into my accounts over and over, and then it's gonna send me codes to my cell phone that don't work no more, and then I'm really fucked, right? That's what you would do if you were a hacker. You guys are just opportunistic predators with criminal nature. I love this tune too much. I can't take it in right now. I love it too much to try and hear it right now. I want to hear it. Seven. And it's a complete coincidence that 10 minutes before the mayor comes on, I can't get online until 10 minutes after it started, which is all the time they're going to give to Black History. Not the full 10 minutes, just it was done like 10 minutes after the hour.
Could have made a name, but got a toe tag. They could have cyphered with.
They need a note.
Nah, they couldn't just start SICKLY, you know?
Free up the youth now,
See?
Free six, free kilo.
Damn it. Can't I find Adidas. That's the warp core on the Enterprise. So wherever drum beats came from before 500 years ago, 400 years from insurance records, we know 400 years of slave ships. And yeah, they traded, they carried all sorts of other shit too, all sorts of evilness. What's the word? Low cost producers and high cost. So I don't know how to put this. You send a British person to Canada, they want British stuff, tea, which isn't British, but that's not the internet. And they're going to pay more for it here. And whatever you do here to make money, they're going to get paid less for it. Yeah, so that's economic slavery. You were a slave. You weren't even on the fucking boat. Okay, so, but yeah, these drum beats to keep it rolling into, just like the computer in your car now is what keeps the timing running. It's the warp core on the Enterprise. You've seen what? I'm drawing parallels to things I'm not supposed to notice. What's like your favorite character? The most important one's the black one, but they're always ostensibly a side character.
I be sinning, I'm winning.
Being Roddenberry's not racist, right?
Yeah, I bet. I see the pain in their heart and their chest. While she said I'ma get that spinach. I be sinning, I'm winning.
Third
they don't like
verse,
it.
sing it
Yeah, I bet.
first. Walk
See the
away
pain in
and
their
say
heart
your
and their
face.
chest.
You let
I
it
love the
come
rain when it
between
falls.
us.
Yeah,
Set some
blessed.
social distance
Fuck the
space.
pain
Hit
in
you right
the
in
cause
the
and
face
the
for less
chest.
than 2 minutes.
I had them
So
thinking
give
I
a
was
fuck
God
to
to the
the
sight.
guys,
I never
everybody.
left to live a life you would die
Start
for.
shit like you
I can't say
so
bro, I'm no lifeguard. Maybe you can get the deed, but I might charge. Pull up to the spot, they're like, who is that? Hands up, give me the loot like a cashier. What you thought? Are you dumb? I don't play shit. I'll kill you and your brother with the same clip. What kind of bullshit you been talking, boys, ain't you? I'm a different man now. Leave your face. Watch you said I'ma get that spinach. I be sinning, I'm winning. They don't like it. Yeah, I bet. I see the pain in their heart and their chest. Watch you said I'ma get that spinach. I be sinning, I'm winning. They don't like it. Yeah, I bet.
Before last year.
Versus locked and I'm leaving unidentified. Just the rental had to drop it off at Enterprise. Shell casings in the whip, had to check it twice. I think my OGs for that shit, they give good advice. Yeah, this about to be a genocide. These motherfuckers want me dead, but I can never die. I'm the reason why your wife said she met a guy. 2 minutes in a swisher just to get inside. Yeah, we are not the same kind. We gotta pay dues, I already paid twice. Y'all don't make moves, all you do is waste time. I'ma always be woke while you haters stay blind.
No returns or refunds on gift cards and seasonal products. It don't say toilet paper on the.
I'ma get that spinach. I be sinning, I'm winning. They don't like it, yeah, I bet. See the pain in their heart and their chest.
Wow, almost 10 minutes. Oh, they've done every weirdo type of thing. I mentioned that the CRTC rule is that they have to do the call signs at the top and bottom of every hour. That's every hour and every half hour. And a week later, my machine starts fucking up every half hour now instead of every hour. And that's how creative they are. Shorty got the bird flu. I got a lifetime fever. Don't gotta spit up. Still the virus don't give a fuck. I got a lifetime fever. Don't gotta spit up. Still I got a lifetime fever. Don't gotta spit up. Still 38 revolver flow. 38 revolver flow. 38 revolver flow. It's hard to trace. Whoa. Whip it real hard. In the kitchen, whipping up that freaking till it's real hard. Bitch, I hustle real hard. Bitch, you hustle real small. Bitch, you hustle once a week. Bitch, I flipping Rick Wild. Whip it real hard. In the kitchen, whipping up that freaking till it's real hard. Bitch, I hustle real hard. Bitch, you hustle real small. Bitch, you hustle once a week. Bitch, I'm flipping Rick Wild every day. Grinding hard, grinding big, you grinding small. 38 revolver blows. I'm watch me fucking kill them all. I'll be down to killing dog. Burn him with my fucking blow. Once he dead, go find his bitch. Stop living with his fucking hoe. Working with this fucking hoe. I'll be on my fucking shit. Blow like a revolver. Take 6 shots, you dead, ain't need a clip. Oh. Yeah, the dead spot now.
I got a lifetime fever. Don't gotta spit up. Still feature. I got a lifetime fever. Don't gotta spit up. Still feature. 38. Quiet. Real G's don't talk much. Never lie and won't hesitate to pop one. Got hollows by the bag.
Oh, so the deal with this house, it's the Home Depot house of the future. That's why it's got all these lights and shit you wouldn't normally have. Just to prove they can do it.
Use a bitch made, then I make bitches. Triple R, I ain't fucking with no fake bitches. Real recognize real what's good. Get money and I bring it back to the ask me how I'm doing, probably tell you real good. But I ain't stopping till I'm fucking gripping Ben's wood. And I ain't stopping till I'm fucking bitches in my penthouse. One Lambo, one Rari, chillin' at the penthouse. And a jail locked up, better free the homie bitches call me Sam, cause I got that there's an eagle on me.
Promoting individualism doesn't mean that parents, schools, and our society undermine gender differences. I mean, we should educate children about gender differences and let them make their own choices, not based on social trends, but also based on their own values. Thank you. That's all the time we have for this edition of The World Today. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. For further discussion, you can follow us on Twitter as China Plus News. I'm Joey. Thank you so much for listening.
Right on the flat screen. When you're watching a TV this big, and you see the guy on the TV picture, the TV's like 10 feet tall and 20 feet wide, that looks cool. In real life, his head's doing this stuff.
You're listening to China Plus Radio, connecting you with China and the world.
We're there 24 hours a day. Just like the people.
Now the news outside. China hopes that all sides in Myanmar can appropriately handle their differences under the constitution and legal framework to maintain political and social stability in the country. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin made the remarks on Monday regarding the situation in Myanmar. The Myanmar military said on Monday that new elections will be held after the end of a one-year state of emergency, and it will return the state power to the new government. The president's office declared the state of emergency after State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi, President U Win Mint, and other senior officials were detained by the military. The military said that during the state of emergency, the Union Election Commission will be reformed and the parliamentary elections held in November last year will be reviewed. The state power will be handed over to Commander-in-Chief of Defense Services Min Aung Hlaing. A batch of China donated COVID-19 vaccines has been officially handed over to Pakistan in an air base near the capital, Islamabad. The Pakistan Health Ministry says frontline healthcare workers will be the first one to be vaccinated with a Sinopharm vaccine. The National Command and Operations Center says a strategy has been formed to administer the vaccines across Pakistan. China's top respiratory disease expert Zhong Nanshan says the mass inoculation currently underway in China shows that the country's COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. Official data shows that more than 24 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines have been administered in China so far. In terms of the efficacy of the Chinese vaccines, Zhong says they can protect people against COVID-19 for at least 6 months. The expert also says it takes at least 2 to 3 weeks for the vaccines to produce antibodies before there's a significant protective effect. He says that the development trend of the global COVID-19 pandemic will not become clear until around March. The Indian government has ordered extending the ongoing suspension of internet services for 2 days at borders around the national capital, New Delhi, amid farmers' protests. Officials say the internet services have been suspended at the epicenters, where thousands of farmers have been occupying roads for over 2 months in protest over the federal government's controversial farm laws. The Ministry of Home Affairs says the suspension, the third of its kind order in a week's time, is intended to maintain public safety and avert public emergency. On January 26th, the internet was suspended in many parts of Delhi immediately after farmers' tractor rally inside the capital city, which triggered clashes between them and government forces. Then on Friday night, authorities ordered a suspension of the internet for 2 days. 11 rounds of talks between protesting farmers and the federal government have been held but failed to end the ongoing stalemate. The meeting of the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum has kicked off in Geneva. The meeting is supposed to vote on the positions of a 3-member presidency council and the prime minister of Libya, in accordance with the roadmap adopted by the forum in Tunis in mid-November. The UN Information Office of Geneva says the new interim and unified executive authority will be primarily tasked to lead Libya to national elections set for December 24th of this year, and to reunify state institutions. Tracks began to be laid on Monday for the first Chinese high-speed railway controlled by private capital. The rail line starts from Hangzhou, capital of Zhejiang province, and passes through Shaoxing and Taizhou in the province. It has a total investment of nearly 45 billion yuan, or about $7 billion. It's one of the first 8 high-speed rail projects founded by public-private partnership, with the private sector having a holding status. The new rail line is expected to halve the travel time between Hangzhou and Taizhou to about 1 hour. It's an important project to help boost the regional integrated development of the Yangtze River Delta. China Media Group has held the first rehearsal for this year's Spring Festival Gala. New technology allows overseas audiences to interact with live audiences at China Central Television's studio. The gala show will go through more rehearsals before it's put on air on the eve of the Spring Festival. CMG will air the Spring Festival Gala through its 8K channel on Chinese New Year's Eve on February 11th. And that's the news. I'm Sui.
How can you experience real life in China without making that trip to the fabulous Middle Kingdom? How do you get to meet people living in China without actually coming?
I'm still getting used to New World and Old World, the Eastern and Western hemispheres and all that.
real projects founded by public-private partnership, with the private sector having a holding status. The new rail line is expected to halve the travel time between Hangzhou and Taizhou to about 1 hour. It's an important project to help boost the regional integrated development of the Yangtze River
Let me ask you something. Would you ever cut off
China
the
Media
internet
Group
service?
has held the first rehearsal for this.
Yeah, okay. I thought there was another empty story.
To be heading to some form of democracy. The military was
heading
pretty much 50
towards some form of democracy. You hear how that just slipped out? I didn't edit that on purpose.
To hand at least some power to a civilian government. Today, those same army commanders staged a coup. The woman who had been the country's de facto leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, along with her closest aides and other politicians, were detained. The military said naturally it had been a national emergency. They pointed to what they claimed had been fraud in last November's election, in which their own military-backed party had been humiliated. It's a story which we'll try to work through in some depth during this program. We'll have an eyewitness account from the heavily militarized capital city, get the views of a UN Special Rapporteur on Myanmar, and hear from an activist speaking on behalf of the much abused Rohingya minority. Let's begin, though, with the sequence of events as far as we've been able to piece them together. Michael Bristow is one of the BBC's Asia-Pacific regional specialists.
Well, it appears, first of all, that some of the civilian leaders, the senior civilian leaders, including Aung San Suu Kyi, were put under detention in the early hours of the morning. Afterwards, the army announced on a military-controlled TV station that they'd taken control of the country. They cited a clause in the constitution which allowed them to do that. They announced a state of emergency for a year, and that after that year, they'd hold fresh elections. They announced also that the person in charge would be the General Min Aung Hlaing. He's the head of the army, and he'd be in charge, as I said, for a year. There were troops on the streets in Naypyidaw. That's the capital where most of the politicians in Myanmar were gathered for what was supposed to be the opening of Parliament today for the first time since elections in November. That appears to have made it easier for the army because they surrounded many of the guest houses where MPs were staying and refused to allow them out. So it was a fast and bloodless operation.
And why do you think the military moved now? Because, I mean, they had been signalling dissatisfaction with the absolute thumping they got in last November's elections, at least with the party that's closely associated with them. But why do you think now? What was the significance?
They claim, the army claims, that there were 10 million irregularities with that election, and that seems an enormous amount of irregularities, and really they haven't been substantiated. And even if some of those were found to be true, it seems to have been an extraordinary step to take over the whole of the civilian government. I can only guess, and analysts can only imagine, that this result really was more of an endorsement for Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy. They gained more seats than they did in 2015. And perhaps the army felt that over the next 5 years that they would be pushed out by Aung San Suu Kyi's party, or there would be an attempt to reduce their role in politics. That's exactly what she tried to do during the last parliament. She failed. But there was every indication that that's what she would do in the coming parliament as well.
But just to be clear, the Constitution pretty much gave the army a veto over any change to the balance of power. So why do you think they felt such a threat from Aung San Suu Kyi?
It's difficult to say because they're not the most open of organisations, and you're right to say the Constitution did give them an enormous amount of power, 25% of the seats in Parliament, essentially giving them veto over constitutional changes. Also, they controlled some key ministries, defence and security. So not only they didn't have to listen to the civilian government when it came to operations, say, against the Rohingya in Rakhine State or against any other military operations against ethnic groups. So they had enormous power. But you have to remember that this is an organisation which controlled Myanmar totally for about 50 years until 2011 when it began to give up power in Myanmar. It's used to having such control over everything that went on in the country. So it perhaps thought that even the limited amount of democracy it had given, it was too much.
Our Asia-Pacific regional editor, Michael Bristow. The military may not be popular, at least from the evidence of the last election, but there's clearly nervousness among many Burmese about speaking out about it in public. One of our BBC correspondents in the commercial capital, Yangon, has been trying to gather some views.
I'm really shocked and panicked. I've been feeling unwell all day. I was in tears all day, just crying. I'm worried because my daughter hasn't finished school. She's still halfway. Also, there's a pandemic. I'm worried the price of the commodities will go up. I'm hopeful Mother Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and all her colleagues will be released peacefully, and she and her colleagues will be free and make the country better.
I am surprised and trembling. I'm fearful that prices will go up and people will revolt. I hope that Daw Aung Suu Kyi and her colleagues will be freed sooner rather than later.
That's Yangon. What about the newly constructed capital, Naypyidaw? As we've been hearing, along with the arrests, the tanks and barricades and razor wire, there were the other classic characteristics of the coup. Flights disrupted and communications suspended. But we did manage to get through to one local journalist in Naypyidaw. He asked that we withhold his identity to protect his safety, so we voiced what he's had to say.
I'm now in Naypyidaw, the capital of Burma. What I've seen today is lots of tanks, at least 5 tanks blocking the parliament gate. Earlier in the morning, I saw the military soldiers with guns blocking the entrance of the municipal guest house.
Good, because look what
where
just
the newly
happened at the
elected
Capitol
MPs were ready to go to the parliament. They were not able to go and start the new parliamentary session. That's what the military wanted, because the military has been putting pressure on the government to postpone the new parliamentary session that was meant to happen today.
And what do you think was the key issue with the new session of Parliament? Why do you think it was that the military wanted to move now?
Well, it's very clear that the military does not want Aung San Suu Kyi to rule the country, although they have barred her from becoming president. According to the Constitution, she cannot be a president, but her party proposed a law in 2016 to create a position called state councillor. She has been ruling the country as the second highest government official. The military doesn't really want that.
Do we know anything about where she is being held and who is being held with her?
It's very unclear, even though we have seen some social media posts by her party spokesperson, which said she is well and she is in her residence and works in the garden frequently. But many people are debating whether the spokesperson's account was hacked. So people didn't believe the statement earlier today to strike against that military coup. They were debating that too. So now, whatever the spokesperson will post on his Facebook account, people will find it hard to know whether to believe if it's true or not.
And Naypyidaw itself, since it's been built, the military has been very obvious there. Does it feel different today, the city?
Not really. The city looks pretty much the same as before. But of course, around the Parliament building and the municipal guest house compound, the security is tighter, and there are soldiers on the street. It's very obvious. I saw one soldier with a gun in the market, standing and guarding. That's it. But everything else seems pretty normal, and people are shopping in the market.
In terms of your best guess, do you think that the military will be wanting to keep Aung San Suu Kyi away from cameras and as quiet as possible? Or do you think, in order to reassure, perhaps, or try to reassure some of her supporters across the country, that you expect to see her appear in some form?
When she appears and gives her speech to the people, she will of course urge the people to strike. This is what I feel. She is very influential. People will definitely follow her. So I don't think the military will let her appear, you know.
A journalist speaking to us anonymously from Naypyidaw. Close observers of Myanmar say there's long been personal tension between Aung San Suu Kyi and the man who now has unfettered authority, the army chief, General Min Aung Hlaing. These observers have also been pointing out that the military have been signalling for some days now that they might be about to make some move ahead of the scheduled new session of Parliament. But still, a full-blown coup appears to have caught many off guard. Phil Robertson is Deputy Asia Director with the advocacy group Human Rights Watch. What's his reaction?
I believe that, in fact, this was part of the Myanmar military's negotiating strategy with the civilian government, that they were concerned enough that they were trying to figure out how to pressure them to give concessions, but I didn't believe that it would go so far as to constitute a military coup.
Beyond the dismay, Phil, are you able to try and divine what the military's game is here, why they felt the need to do this, because it's not as if Myanmar was completely democratic, as we might say. The civilian government held total control over the military at all. So why do you think the soldiers decided they needed to push things further?
Well, I think that this also swings on the ambitions of the commander-in-chief, Min Aung Hlaing. This is a person who anticipated that he would be president of Myanmar. And it was quite clear that with the election result, there was no way for him to get there through the current system. This is what they tried to do with the 2008 constitution, largely successfully, because, of course, they did get that into place, even though the referendum that they did was, in our view, fraudulent and problematic. But the reality is that they have put in place an undemocratic constitution that guarantees them significant benefits. A quarter of the parliamentarians appointed by the military. I can't think of any other democracy in the world that has that kind of provision. So the reality is that they wanted more.
Why do you think they are so unpopular in the country? Why did they get hammered in the last elections?
The people had 50 years of experience under military dictatorships. They saw the rights abuses. They saw the corruption. All these things were a product of military rule. And, it wasn't like the military was delivering goods and services and other sort of benefits to the people of Myanmar.
Can I just clear up one thing? The military laid the groundwork for today by saying that they'd uncovered widespread fraud in last year's elections. What is your verdict on how free and fair those elections were?
Well, first of all, the military has not provided evidence of that widespread fraud. There was a writ filed with the Supreme Court by the USDP and another political party, claiming millions of irregularities. But these have not been proved. When we look at the international observers and the diplomats and the national monitoring networks, they all broadly concluded that while there were problems in the elections, it did not constitute problems that rose to the level of bringing the election into question. There are certainly problems with the elections. We pointed those out going forward, but then also the disenfranchisement of over 1 million Rohingya. It's not something that resulted in a stolen election. And that is what the Myanmar military is alleging, that there was something that it constituted a threat to national sovereignty, and therefore a state of emergency had to be called.
Phil Robertson, Deputy Asia Director with Human Rights Watch, will be hearing shortly from a prominent Burmese historian, and a little bit later in the program, getting reaction from a Rohingya activist and also a UN rapporteur on the country. You're listening to NewsHour.
I found the good parts of the book.
Coming up on the program, we'll also be hearing about a startup company in the US state of Maine, which has developed the first commercial rocket powered by a bio-derived fuel using an ingredient only found on farms.
From
before there were cars, there were trains, and that's how it is in space. Right now, there are freight trains to space, like SpaceX and ULA. There are medium-sized companies and rockets that are launching, I would call them buses to space, but we want to be the Uber to space.
That in just over 10 minutes. A reminder of our main headline this hour. President Biden has warned the Burmese military leaders that they will be held accountable for staging a coup in Myanmar.
Probably not.
You're at the BBC World Service and live from London, NewsHour with me, Tim Franks. As I said, communications with Myanmar have been rather patchy today. They were cut almost entirely to begin with. But earlier, my NewsHour colleague, Julian Marshall, did manage to get through to the prominent historian and author Thunt Mien Oo in Yangon. How sensitive will the military be to the international condemnation of the coup which has blown?
One thing that we have to always remember is how isolated the elites in Myanmar have been. I mean, this is a country that was isolated from the rest of the world for decades and then came under sanctions. So I think if you spend, if one spends any time in Naypyidaw and meets a lot of senior people, you're really in a world that's almost completely cut off. So it's not, it's not as if international states and international relations are not important to them, but it's far from being a major factor, I think, in their calculations. I think on both sides, but especially the army side, Myanmar is the whole world, and I think all of their calculations, all of their friends and enemies are within the country.
The army has declared a state of emergency for 1 year, after which it says there will be fresh elections. It's still committed to a multi-party system. Should we take them at their word?
I think when they say a multi-party system, they mean a multi-party system under this constitution in which the army still has, a tight grip on the security sector and a big influence generally. And that's something that some people in the country might feel is okay, but there will be many others in the country, especially around Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD, who think that that's wrong and that's the fundamental problem in the country that needs to change.
What about the Burmese
I think a year is also a
snack?
very long time in a place like Myanmar. I mean, Myanmar is a country which, like everywhere else in the world, is experiencing the pandemic, but also an acute economic crisis, which has driven tens of millions of people into extreme poverty. But it's also a country with dozens of different ethnic armed organizations and hundreds of different militia. It has an open border with China, an illicit drug trade worth tens of billions of dollars. So this is a country where political crisis, if it kind of spins out of control and leads to general social unrest, really has the potential to tip the country over into an even worse situation than it's experienced over the past few decades.
What do you mean by that?
Maybe.
I mean that, this is a country where a lot of people have weapons. There's not all-out fighting. Instead, there's ceasefires or sort of informal ceasefires. You have a lot of people who are extremely unhappy, frustrated, anxious, moving around the country in their millions looking for jobs right now because income has fallen precipitously over the past year. And in particular, there are a lot of poor people who can be easily mobilized by one side or another. And in a way, we've had the violence against the Rohingya, we've had armed conflicts in the country, but it's a country of 55 million awash in weapons with huge illicit industries. And I think the situation could just get much worse. And to some extent, it is this elite compact at the center between the army and the NLD that has kept a degree or a facade of normalcy, which has led to foreign investment coming in, which has meant that places like Yangon and Mandalay, the two big cities, have an air of normality and growth and economic progress. But I think that could change direction very quickly if the political crisis that we have now continues and gets worse.
The historian and author Thunt Minh Nhu speaking to Julian Marshall from Yangon. While Western governments battle over limited COVID vaccines, many poorer countries have no supplies to fight over. Take war-torn Idlib, the last opposition-controlled province in Syria. Health officials there say they've no idea when they'll be getting any vaccines. They believe that at least 20,000 people in the region have contracted the virus, but say that a lack of testing facilities means that the true total could be 10 times that. More than 500 have died so far. But even when vaccines do finally arrive, around half of Idlib's health workers will refuse to distribute them, according to a recent local survey. Mike Thompson has this report.
Recent testing found that more than 1 in 4 people in Idlib's crowded displacement camps, like Salahaddin near the Turkish border, were COVID positive.
Most of the camp was infected with COVID-19. I myself have also been infected, and my mother and my neighbor died because of COVID.
Camp manager Abu Ayman says recent flooding and sub-zero winter temperatures have turned the difficult into near impossible, and that this, on top of trauma caused by a decade of conflict, means that many here have simply stopped thinking about COVID-19.
It is very difficult to maintain social distancing in a very crowded situation. It's too many people at a very small space, and there is lack of health education. People still are shaking hands, hugging each other when greeting, and not following preventive measures.
Even some doctors sometimes they said, okay, no need for any precautions. If there is a bump, it will take more lives than COVID. So people don't concern about COVID.
Trauma surgeon Dr. Mahmoud Hariri says COVID cases seem to have dipped after peaking a few weeks ago, but he believes that a lack of testing facilities and people's fear of dying in hospital may help explain that.
The total number, almost 20,000 infected. This is as per PCR test. But there is, of course, maybe 10 times this number because so many patients do not go to the hospitals or the community isolation centers.
2/3 of Idlib's intensive care beds currently lie empty, but medics fear that with oxygen and supplies of PPE running low, the next COVID wave could overwhelm local health services here without access to vaccines.
There is no confirmation whatsoever on when this vaccine will arrive.
Dr. Hani Al-Talib is a member of the COVID-19 task force for northwest Syria.
We did explore with medical workers whether they would accept receiving the vaccine, and surprisingly, half of them said no.
Half of the medical workers said no.
Half of them said no.
Such views aren't confined to health workers. Former civil engineering student who now lives in a